Let's see, I didn't bring my glasses, but, okay, structurally, did you always, well, I did my glasses. Handed them to me before I went out.
I heard the word trauma before. Everyone knows the word trauma. But when I heard it used about me, I didn't like it.
I'm going to read that chapter backwards and see what we learned from it. I thought this book was absolutely incredible. I loved it. And I guess I have so many questions I want to ask you, but the first one, it must be, I don't really know what this is like to have your first book be such a success, and what kind of pressure that might put on a second book.
It was 1,000 times harder to write the second book. In the writing space, you have your demons and your voices and your critics, and like the rare believer or cheerleader that keeps you going. And I think the room got filled up with more critics and demons and voices that didn't exist when I was writing there.
Following this ancestry that's so alive in your book, did you do a lot of research to kind of get those ghosts alive?
I was sort of against writing historical fiction, so it was not part of the plan. I started writing the sequel a few months before There came out, and it was just straightforward, like right after the powwow, just launching into the aftermath. And then I was, almost a year later, I was in Sweden for the translation of There into Swedish, and the organizers invited me to this museum, and the museum people were like, so we have your people's stuff, and we know we shouldn't have it. And it was this like meta tour of this big wing of native stuff that they had. And it was like a picture of the state of museums now. It's like, okay, we all know we shouldn't have all this stuff.
We stole this.
But we still have it, and we don't know what to do. So do you still want to see it for a little while until we figure it out?
Yeah.
So I sort of stumbled into I saw a newspaper clipping that talked about these prisoners at Fort Marion Prison Castle. I stumbled into this history. I didn't know about this history, and this is my tribe. Southern Cheyenne people are not featured in a lot of history. And so I stumbled into this interesting piece of history, important piece of American history, because it was the origin of the boarding schools. And a lot of Native people, I would even say most Native people, know about the devastation of boarding schools, but it's not necessarily on anybody else's radar, because it's like almost 100 years of people actively trying to wipe out our culture and languages in schools by putting the kids there. But it started with, at this prison castle, Richard Henry Pratt, taking prisoners of war who were adults and militarizing, Christianizing them, and teaching them English and being like, this is really effective. Let's go do it to all the kids. Like, it's an insane leap from like this 3-year program to like, let's do this for 100 years to all the Native children in the country. So I fell down this rabbit hole of like,
Kill the Indian, save the man.
That was the motto.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any family stories connected to it, so in terms of ancestral line and thinking about it, what I did have was growing up with a story about the St. Creek Massacre. And that was a story that my dad told repeatedly because it was where he got his Cheyenne name from. It was about a young man who saved a baby the day of the massacre. And Wandering Stars starts off with a young man saving a younger boy. So it's based on, the beginning is based on a family story, and sort of how would somebody from the massacre have ended up being sort of rounded up and put on a train and taken to Florida. So I did a ton of research. After I saw that newspaper clipping, But there was a moment when I realized, so in early 2018, I decided the next book was going to be called Wandering Stars. Totally randomly.
Once you read the book, you realize it's one of the greatest titles that anybody ever came up with. It's so perfect.
Thank you. This is a very unromantic story about where the idea came from. It's maybe even annoying as a story. I was signing books. I was signing there at a warehouse, a Penguin Random House warehouse. And the sales reps played a Spotify playlist based on There by Radiohead as a route, and Wandering Star by Portishead came on. And for whatever reason, it's just started to dawn on me that it's weird. In that moment, I was like, I'm gonna write a sequel, and it's gonna be called Wandering Stars. No idea why I was convinced. It just became a reality. So I started to do all this research. This was in March of 2018. I didn't go to Sweden until spring of 2019. So I'm just writing a straightforward sequel, and I find out this history. I start writing a character named Star, because I already have this title. And I start doing this research, and the Star is coming away from the massacre, because I want to find a way to include this historical piece that's a family story. I find out that the prison castle is shaped like a star. And then I find out, I see a list of prisoners in a book called War Dance at Fort Marion. Two of the prisoner names are Star, and these actual prisoners at this prison castle, Star and Bearshoe, who's a family name from there. And so in that moment, I realized I was going to try to write this thing that creates a family line that starts at Sand Creek, which I'd already started writing, but goes to the prison castle and eventually lands us in the aftermath of There. So a ton of research and a little bit of family story to start it out, and a little bit of synchronicity or coincidence, or I don't know what to call it at some point, with these star things that came into it.
Well, it's beautiful and it really works. I was curious when I was reading it whether or not you were a Faulkner fan, because I found myself thinking a little bit about As I Lay Dying and the way that he used multiple voices to communicate a larger story. Were you a fan of his? Do you have any inspiration?
I guess I don't know, I was going to say I'm ashamed to say, but I think I'm like ambiguous to say. I've never read any Faulkner.
Well, I think subconsciously it was a huge influence. You feel that as a native writer, that you have to be a native writer, and is that difficult? Is that a dumb question?
No, not at all. I mean, I think we both of us, because of where we find ourselves, for whatever set of circumstances that lands you in, this area where you have a stage or a microphone, or you get this success, you do become, you have an opportunity to tell stories that sometimes with native stories and marginalized stories, it can feel like mainstream people are doing marginalized people a favor by or expressing their wokeness by spending their time with the stories. And it feels like native stories are such a vital part of American history that you're not, as an American, you should know the clear and full story of this country. And you're not doing anybody any favors by hearing this part that we willfully ignore because it makes us look, less good as a country. I mean, we all sort of know, but willfully, continually ignore this sort of very dark and, I think, vital part of American history that if we could face it and include it, would change us for the better. I think people think it's shameful sometimes, and it would maybe like, in our institutions, it's so sterilized. It's like seems intended to just make patriotic people. But I think looking at what we are, the beauty and the darkness as a people, as a country, would only make us more full and whole. But it feels like anytime we go to these darker places, it's like a drag. And that part of the burden that you're asking about feels shitty. You know, you don't want to be trying to like bring people down.
Well, part of your greatest tool to do that, you utilize so beautifully, which is humor. Your books are so funny. I mean, they're extremely painful, you see, but I laughed constantly. There's so much wit and life in the people. I just recognize them as people, and that is, in and itself, is so healing, of letting us in on the joke, you know, and I think that's what makes it so all the more powerful. That's my favorite kind of writing, does that. And I agree with you completely. Stories are so healing, and they are part of American history. They're how we can know ourselves. And I don't know, I think you're doing that with your work, and I really appreciate it. Let's see, I didn't bring my glasses, but, okay, structurally, did you always, Ryan, do you have my glasses? You handed them to me before I went out? These are not mine. Yeah, of course.
Structurally, did you always intend different POVs with there? Why that structure? Was it a choice or organic? So, yeah, I wrote there always. I thought of the idea when I just found out I was going to be a father. I was driving down to the Largo in LA from Oakland, going to see this pianist, Chili Gonzalez. And the idea for there just like popped in my head in a moment. And it was just all these lives, all these native lives coming together at the Oakland Coliseum. And at that point, I'd read books that came from all these different POVs, and I loved the style of like, as a reader, like hearing different voices and figuring out how it all fits together. Like, I think we're driven by the hero, the singular hero sort of overcomes arc. Like, it's ingrained in the way we think of stories. But to me, I'm like, well, life is like a lot of different POVs of people that you have to make sense of. And it felt like a more communal thing, and Native people are so flattened by this idea of a singular, version of us, this historical version of us. So it felt like an opportunity to be able to write from different perspectives and different ages and different genders as a way to make more nuanced this flattened version of us. So I did always organically, sure, like how it came together, but the premise initially with there was always a multi-POV perspective.
And the same is true for this book?
Yeah, I think it was because it was a continuation. Like structurally, I was planning on doing a similar thing. It's just the historical thing was the thing that kind of came out of nowhere.
Were there certain voices that came a lot easier than others?
Yeah, with there, certain voices came in days, like just fully formed, and other ones took years. With this one, I feel like I was concurrently working on all of them in a struggle like for 6 years.
In second grade, your teacher was, no, that's not it. This is from a teacher. What would you want a group of high schoolers who've read There to walk away with?
I don't know. With a novel, sometimes I get the question about like, what message do you want people to get?
I know, it's tough.
With a novel, like I feel like, and you know, I'm very sympathetic to high schoolers, and I want high schoolers like to engage with the work. So I think engagement itself is a really good sign. If they engage with the work, that is, I don't want them to walk away. Like I want them to keep, you know, engaging with other books and having that mean that they engage with other books. I don't have a meaning for a novel. Is not doing like a PSA messaging thing. It's like very messy, and I'm a very messy person, and my novels are messy, and like take from it what you will. I hope something's useful. I hope you enjoy parts.
Did you have books when you were a high schooler that turned you on to writing?
I don't know.
Not at all. When did it start for you?
Not until after college. So I got an undergrad in sound engineering, and just needed a job, and I got a job at East Bookstore, and I also, it was part-time at the East Bookstore and part-time as a data entry clerk at the Native American Health Center, which is where I sort of first started working in the community. And the woman who hired me at the East Bookstore like really just wanted me to move books. I wasn't a reader, like there's no reason she should have hired me. I didn't come in saying I was a reader. I just saw her thing in the classified. I'm like very old if I'm like still getting jobs from the classified store. But I moved like 2 warehouses into one, and I moved the whole fiction section from the back of the store to the front, and that was where I found fiction for the first time. So books before that in school was just like I would skim them to pass tests, and I usually wouldn't even pass them.
You know, I find that so inspiring. You know, I think so many of us, I always feel like this is kind of embedded in us that people who have talent know it at some early age, and that they're following, you know, it's like God is anointed. And the fact that you found it late, I found so inspiring. What gave you the confidence to engage with doing it?
I don't know if it was confidence. It felt maybe more like desperation. My parents like were crazy on fire for God. Growing up, I had an evangelical Christian, and my dad was Native American church, and like both of my parents emphasized God in like crazy ways. Like I was like talking about a crush when I was 6, and they're asking me like, does she believe in God? What?
Yeah.
So there was like a hole when I decided I wasn't going to be a part of either of their religions. There was a hole that I was seeking to fill, and the first things I was reading was philosophy and religious books, and like, you know, like the Upanishads, like crazy, like searching for like how can I fill this? And nobody had really like handed me a book like you should check out what fiction is. It was just like required reading stuff. And so when I found it, I was like, oh, this is my whole thing. This is what I want.
Time isn't necessarily chronological the way we experience it. And I feel that in the book, where there's somehow perhaps this thing of God's time that we can't understand, that's kind of beyond us, that I love it when literature does that. And his book does it so beautifully when you read it, where you're seeing how things are relating to each other in a way that we couldn't possibly know. And so that doesn't surprise me to hear that that's the way you were raised.
I appreciate that. I was recently called by a Lakota woman who's very close to my family in Oakland, the most spiritual, unspiritual person she's ever met. And I feel like the unspoken piece that you're referencing is something that like I can't help but have been touched by this relationship to God because of my life and who my parents were. But it's definitely not like something I'm actively trying to do in the book. It's something that also touches the characters and sort of this yearning that they have, that is also compounded by, you know, going through this really hard thing that is their country being replaced by another one.
This book contains these descriptions from children that are so playful linguistically and so true to life. Are these from interviews? My favorite was the description of Lonnie's powers, so potent and grasping at the sacred and holy.
No, the Lonnie stuff is just from, I don't know, wherever the stuff comes from. The imagination, the revision, trying to think about how kids talk, the cadences and the imagination, and where, not from interviews at all. I have kids, and obviously that's a huge influence on the way you think about writing kids. Writing kids is tough. It's like with child acting. It's a huge risk, because when child acting fails, it's painful for everybody. Like, you feel bad for the kid, you feel bad for the movie.
You're mad at the parents for making them do it.
But when it succeeds, it's like the best thing ever. It's like, wow, how could a kid be so actualized already? So it's like, it's a risk. And so I appreciate the idea that you think it comes from an interview from a real kid, because it doesn't.
My daughter said the most amazing thing the other day, she said, this is my youngest, and she said that sometimes, Dad, I really worry that I'm stupid. At school, I can't follow things, and I don't say anything smart, and other kids say smarter things. But then I think about my dreams, and my dreams are amazing. And they're really brilliant, and they're full of metaphor, and they're so elaborate and fully realized, and I'm the dreamer. So I must be smart. And I was like, it's just so true. I mean, I feel that way. Every one of us is this unbelievable well inside of us that is the dreamer. And in life, it comes out weird or awkward all the time, but somewhere secret in there is this powerful wisdom, and that's sometimes child actors, they just have it. You see that kid, Henry Thomas in E.T., that's a brilliant performance. I mean, he's sitting there crying about E.T., and you think he's going through something real. And
I just watched on the plane ride over here, the Anatomy of a Fall. The kid in that
is amazing.
Oh my God.
And the dog, for crying out loud. I aspire for that. But you do, Lonnie, I agree. Lonnie's one of my favorite characters in this. You pull off something in this book that I love it when art can do this. It feels like a magic trick. The last chapter of the book is a magic trick, because all of a sudden everything makes sense, and it shouldn't. I don't want to give anything away, but I really want to encourage you. A magic trick, those last few pages. It blew me away, and it felt, I felt my own family. You made sense of my own family. I finished the book, and I felt like it was just beginning. Meaning that, I now had the keys to really understand what I just read in a different way, and I just was blown away by it.
Thank you. It's so close to crying in public just now. No, I really felt like when the book actually was released last Tuesday, I really felt like a big sense of relief.
Last Tuesday. Hey, congratulations. You're a world-class writer, and it's an honor to be here with you.